All right, I'm so glad to be here with you. My people, the marketing people have gathered. I'm so excited. I'm really excited to be here today, and if you're worried about ROI, I think you're in the right place. The struggle, so I've been in marketing now and in marketing technology for about 30 years. And enterprise software has always been something that traditionally does three things really well. It provides you with an information architecture that reconciles disparate discrete data sets, not every data set in the world. It has an analytics engine that rides on top of that provides you with the insight and the understanding on the performance of the data that you have underlying it. And there's an application layer that interprets those signals and makes them relevant to the applications that serve the need. We in marketing have none of that. Isn't that exciting? We do not have an information architecture, okay? Plainly, we do not have a well-crafted data support for the analytics that run separately from most everything we do. So we have marketing mix modeling, we have attribution, but none of that is informed, or nor does it inform, the applications that we're running consistently. So what are we met with? A patchwork of 100-point solutions and a panic disorder, as the slide would have indicate. And at this point, I always feel like I should apologize because I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've recognized this deficit for a fairly long time. But we're gonna talk to you today, and I've got joining me here three leading brands and their marketing leaders. I'll have them introduce themselves. From AT&T, Indeed, and IBM. They've headed down the course to resolve the problem I just described, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what that looks like. It's a pretty big lift, but it's a digestible lift. You can tackle aspects of that effort today, and by the way, it's required for agentic, okay? All of this noise that we're hearing out at at all the sessions about deploying agentic, across what backbone, people? We have no backbone. The truth about deploying AI right now without this reconciled data is that it will just amplify the noise that you've got going on today. So if you're a CMO, I'm here to tell you this is the number one thing that I think you need to deal with. So with that, I'm going to allow first Ben, Leanne, and then Paul to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what sent you down this journey.
Yes, hi everyone, Ben Henderson. I'm the Director of Marketing Investment Planning for AT&T. And part of our function is to help assess how much we should be spending on marketing, where we should be deploying that investment, and also help measuring some of the return that we see and translating that back to our partners in finance and our partners in the P&L organizations. So, this is a topic that's been super near and dear to our heart, and I think it's the same for the other folks on the panel here.
Yeah. Hi there, I'm Leanne Kirkby. I am Chief of Staff to our Global CMO and also lead Global Marketing Operations at Indeed. And here for very similar reasons. So my team oversees all of the processes, all the really fun stuff, the processes around OKRs, budget, and campaign planning, and how do we bring that together to execute across our global footprint, which is really complicated.
Paul Ambrose, VP of Investments and AI Transformation. And what drives me here today and every day, right, is trying to make sure that we've got as much money for marketing as we can, right? And usually I'm always fighting with the CFO. And so as part of my responsibility and my remit is to prove out the ROI element of marketing and transform it to be a more agentified organization.
Yeah. So the man behind the desk over here is Bruce. He's going to wave at you. Bruce, we're on slide 2. Thank you, sir. Those are the people you're talking to right now? Okay. So part of the problem with not doing this is that we can't answer basic questions. ROI is obviously the biggest question, but how many people have walked into their CEO's office or into the boardroom, been asked a basic question about how the programs are going and told everybody, we'll get right back to you in a quarter after I meet with my MOPS team and run 80 spreadsheets and reconcile all of that with the performance data and let the MMM team have it, right? So this is a huge problem. It's not just a problem and that we can't credibly cite statistics. It's that we're losing credibility amongst the people that we need it with most. So Paul, your mantra has been IA before AI, right? So what does a strong information architecture look like at IBM?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's no AI without IA, right? And that's critical. The thing for us when we took on the project for AI transformation is we started with two things: the processes and the data, right? Before we started to build. And it was a tremendous effort because, simply put, when you think about AI, people think, oh, well, I ask it a question and it understands what I'm saying. No, computers understand mathematical elements, right? And so the fact is that your data needs to be vectorized, which means that you've got to start with the data first before you start to implement AI within the organization.
Yeah, agentic and AI are trained, right? They're trained to think in whatever setting that you want them to think about, right? But nobody's trained them to think like marketers. Nobody's trained them to interpret signals that we would interpret in a certain way that would lead us to move money from one place to another or target a segment that we weren't targeting. So, this notion that you could deploy Snowflake and ChatGPT across the backbone is a little bit nonsensical. So, Ben, you said taxonomy is pretty foundational. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think just building on the points, Paul, that you made on the language and how important it is to get things right, and Marie, to your point on the questions in the boardroom, I think so oftentimes we see different people thinking about the same thing and calling it something different. Or it might contain parts of one thing but not parts of the other thing. And so something that we've really put a tremendous amount of effort on at AT&T is trying to get that underlying language solved before we implement any of the models or some of the more advanced features you can do. Because without that, you're going to get a very sexy solution that's very crisp and very clean, and it's going to be very confident in giving you the wrong answer. And so that's something that I think we've done really well at AT&T in getting the actual language clarified before we do some of the more exciting stuff.
I think that's the definition of agents, right? Confident about the wrong answer. That's so true, right? How many people have used Salesforce campaigns and HubSpot campaigns and they mean nothing like the other one means, right? So when you're trying to interpret that data, it's the wrong signal. Leanne, there's something that underlies taxonomy that you think is pretty important. What is that?
Yeah, I think it's just the clarity across teams of this having a shared understanding. So we've gone through a very similar exercise as what Ben and AT&T have done. But what we realized when we were going through that, we kind of put this nomenclature out there, and then we learned that interpretation was different. Mm-hmm. So people were reading the same thing, but thinking it was something different. So as much as our data was all in one place, and people are submitting or categorizing in the way they thought made sense, we were realizing it causes a lot of downstream issues. So it's also just that shared understanding and giving really clear definitions in order to make sure that the data makes sense as you go forward.
If I could interrupt,
yeah, go ahead.
It's so true on what both of you all had said, taxonomy-wise. I had 10 different campaigns, and all 10 would adjust product names, combine products, come up with different audiences, and it became very tough when you started to try to bring out the data elements. So taxonomies are critical.
And it's also something across so many different teams because marketing thinks about things one way, but what is marketing? Marketing is research and analytics. It's product marketing. It's brand. It's campaign governance, marketing operations, and so there's so many different stakeholders that. Even to get the taxonomy right, there's a tremendous amount of stakeholdering with a tremendous amount of folks.
That's right. You've got to sell it uphill, right? Anytime somebody asks for something, it's kind of like when they ask for an asset, right? They'll walk in and say, I deal with my CEO like this all the time, right? He'll say, I need a one sheet. And I'll say, what do you need it for? He'll describe something completely different. I'm like, you don't need a one sheet. So, it's the same problem, right? But the problem you're describing is a little bit more serious. And that is related to how we handle data so that the data can interpret a signal that you can then react and respond to. How are we supposed to do more with less? That's my favorite tagline of the year. I always want to say, why don't you tell me what I do, and then I'll do more with less. And they don't like that one. But come on, you know it's true. What's funny to me is that, what was I just saying? I just told I lost my train of thought because I was laughing at myself. Anyway. I find myself funny. It's the fact that this is something vendors should be providing. How is it that technologists were allowed for the last 30 years to get away with providing us with a patchwork of quilt of solutions, individual point solutions, all that spoke a different language, all with a different proxy indicator, impressions, click-throughs, open rates, you know what they are, none of which actually find their way to being valuable to the stakeholders that it matter most to. So you're left to figuring out those taxonomies. Now, that doesn't mean that vendors shouldn't be working in concert with you to figure out what those right taxonomies are, but I don't even think that's really happening. Are most of the vendors that you're working with kind of going down this direction, or who wants to answer that question?
I would say no. I haven't seen one that does the complete solution. We've built a framework where we look at some of the major platforms and then build around it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of the way we've laid it through.
And then you've got to go sell it to the next vendor and the next vendor and the next vendor. And wouldn't it be great if everybody wasn't trying to create their own walled garden with their own language and then making you the person to try and figure that out? I'm leading the witness because we're going to tell you what we're ringing here, but. So Ben, you talk about how AI has weaponized expectations. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, and you heard this in, I think, nearly every session that I was in, at least, in this concept of doing more with less. And AI solves all of our problems, and it does it right now, and there's no work required. We just turn it on, and everything gets easier. And I think there's that expectation at the senior leadership level where it just works. And I think what oftentimes people that are actually getting the work done are stuck with is this data mess that we had before, right? Where, I can go in and I can have AI write my email, which is great, and it does save some time. And I don't want to diminish that. It actually, if you've gotten emails from me, you can tell when I write it versus when AI writes it. And when AI writes it, it's very clear. You actually know what I want from you. But no, I think that there's this expectation from the C-suite and particularly from the CFO's office on business cases around AI and particularly in marketing that, we can justify our 5% reduction in your budget because AI. And there's not really much substance beneath that at this point. And I think we're all trying our best to keep up with that expectation. But that's something that I think we all need to be fair to ourselves and give more time to do that. And then secondly, on the actual data itself, people can make AI say whatever it wants. Yep. So if you can feed AI a very distorted set of facts, again, it will come out with a very confident answer citing sources that you give it, but it's not necessarily impartial. And so as information gets more democratized, which is generally a good thing, I think there is a watch out to people being maybe a little bit more selective than they should in terms of what they're getting from AI.
Leanne, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm learning through this process that AT&T and Indeed are actually quite on the same path, I think, and we're going about the same thing. And for us, the first step over the last few years has been just get the data in the same spot. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have, if you flash back kind of 5 years ago, we didn't have a centralized place for all of this information. And so we went through quite an exercise to just even get people to put it in a system rather than their separate individual spreadsheets. And then now we're working through what's the value of that? How do you get people along that journey so that it just doesn't feel like more work for them, but that it's also what are they going to get from it? And part of that will be how do we justify as the marketing department overall versus just your individual team and answering those one-off questions. So I don't think we're there yet, but we're on the path, I would say.
Paul, thoughts on AI?
So my mandate, right, that I've got on me is a 70% agentification of our workflows. And so when I started down that path, the first thing that I did is I mapped the organization from a process perspective. We've got roughly about 327 processes and thousands upon thousands of subtasks, right? And it's been completely digitalized, and we have been able to use that to then start our AI roadmap, which is really taken off. So it's been great, but I will tell you this: it was a 6-month tough situation to try to get through all the processes. Talk to every person as part of the social media campaign and understand how did you build the ad, and how did legal look at that. So it's very tedious, getting through that and understanding it. But once you lay the groundwork and then you build out the information architecture, it takes it to a new level.
Yeah. But trained monkeys can do marketing, right? I heard that somewhere, right? Or my favorite was the CFO is going to take over as the head of performance. And I think we should let him. I mean, that's my personal vote. I'm just saying we should quit for a year just to see how it goes, right?
But so listen, I want to switch spots. He can take that role, and I'll take his role.
Exactly. I mean, it's just counting numbers. How hard could it be, right?
Remind me to short IBM stock. If that happens.
I mean, listen, this is partially our fault. I lay a lot of blame at the feet of technologists because, I was there. I sometimes blame myself for the place that we're in. But equally, we haven't done a great job of sharing that complexity in a way that they can understand it, right? It's not their job to interpret our proxy indicators and figure it out. It's our job to report out in a language that finance understands and the board understands, and that's return on investment at the end of the day. And at that point, we get our credibility back, and guess what? We get more budget. When you can defend the budget you've got and you can prove that you've moved in quarter programs that are going to be more effective in another campaign area because you now have structured data, you get more budget. What are some of the benefits you guys have seen? Because you're still in the process of all of this. Leanne, any come to mind?
We've actually had some really great results of it. I think as you were just speaking there, the first thing that comes to mind is accuracy. So when teams have their information, particularly on budget, that's really important. But as teams have their information in all these different spots, it's really easy to argue that finance has a number, marketing has a number, marketing operations might have a different number, the actual marketer has a third number, and then who's right? And it's really hard to know. So one of the benefits we have, and my FP&A partner talks about it all the time, is just like having a single source of truth. So having that one spot, one number, knowing that that is what we're working from, it kind of takes all those base conversations away. But in terms of actually like hard metrics and information, we went, after going through kind of that full taxonomy and categorization exercise, it now allows us automated reporting. Anyone on our leadership team up to the C-suite can go into actually Uptempo and just a plug, and pull the report, and they can look at it in a flexible way because we've got that kind of base structure in place. But then in terms of time saved, it actually saves, it was a marketing-driven project, but it saves finance kind of anywhere between 4 to 8 hours every close cycle. So that's a real win for the partnership with finance because we championed it, but we obviously see some benefits, but they actually see the bigger benefit. But it's a win-win really on both sides.
I love that. I mean, listen, the inordinate, I think it's something on the order of 20% of our allocated budget goes toward proving that we're doing the rest right. How did that happen, right? At what point did that become the right way to go about things, right? Because we love crunching numbers, right? That's our favorite thing, is to try to figure these things out. And meanwhile, they start suggesting that AI should be targeted at things like content and writing and creativity and all the things that we really find valuable. So it really would behoove us to kind of recapture what is brand ownership, what is market penetration, and be able to react and respond in quarter as opposed to a quarter behind. What have you gotten out of it
Yeah.
in your long foray into this space?
Yeah, it's certainly been a journey. I think similar to you, we've seen a lot of questions pop up that we didn't get before. And I think that they're really good questions because what it's doing is it's showing that people have an interest. And so that data democratization I talked about before, I think has let people like our finance partners, even folks in legal, or even just folks in the organization that have an interest in marketing, understand more about what we're doing. And the more people you have asking questions, and I trashed on IBM stock, so I think this was you guys, ask why.
You never get fired for hiring IBM. It's still
slogan.
true.
So ask why, and I think that's what you see a lot of people doing now that they have the data, which is a great IBM thing. So I balanced it out for those of you keeping score. But the ability for people to go in and ask questions and self-serve some of the answers has been really good. A topic I guess I'll share is, our finance partners are really interested in what we're spending on campaigns. And so what they're looking at is, well, how much invoices did I get this month for media? And of course, that doesn't tie out to what our MMM models are getting because that's not the way media works. And so we're able to go in and, we've had some early trials with this in AI of here's how to explain the difference between my invoiced amount and my media aired amount and show that just because we invoiced more this month does not always mean that you will see higher, whatever that month, because that's not when the media is actually airing. So there's been a lot of just good questions that people have been asking.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and the heavy lifting, by the way, should be something you find from software vendors that are like-minded. Paul, what have you seen gains out of?
So for us, the big thing that's changed this year is started in January is where we sat there with the CFO on a monthly basis and reviewed our ROI models. So we basically have now taken all the data out of Uptempo, both the planning and spend modules. And those were important because the planning one allowed us to capture everything that the marketers were doing at the tactic level. And then we were able to tie the spend to it, right? And then we got that into our data marts and got that connected to the performance side of the house. And when we were able to do that, it then led us to different discussions with the finance team. And it's also starting to lead into different discussions with demand strategy, with content, because now it's about really optimizing what we do.
That's awesome. We're going to, in about a minute and 45 seconds, go to Bruce, the man behind the counter. Since you're up here, Bruce, I'm going to let you do that demo piece when we get to it, FYI. But I want to ask, what is your great hope as you continue to work on this? What would be your North Star? Leanne, you want to start?
Sure. I have a dream that I think is lofty but not impossible, where all of our campaigns, budget, plans, and results are all connected so that we can see what we've planned, see what we did, what we spent, and then how it performed, and automatically optimize from there in a way that we're just saving marketers time. Marketers didn't get into marketing to do the operations piece. Well, most didn't. I certainly didn't.
No, I definitely didn't.
They wanted to be creative and do the actual marketing. So how much can we alleviate from their plate to be able to let them go do the marketing and be the really kind of intelligent marketers that they are? So that's the dream, is that we just make it really easy, and people, I think marketing operations is an area that's really easy for people to complain about, but how do we make people feel that we're an empowerer of their success?
We have the same dream. Paul?
I think for me, the dream is when a CMO no longer defends existence and really looks to deliver, engineered growth, right? That to me is what, great looks like.
Absolutely. Ben?
I think there's a number of different internal metrics that we can point to and say, yeah, that's what we want to do. Something we're really big about at AT&T is putting the customer first, period. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we are able to do a lot better if we stop all of these internal squabbles over budget and is this working, is this not working, and actually put more time in developing how do we improve the experience for that customer.
Yep.
So that would be my hope with AI.
100%. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it. Hang out. We're going to have Bruce walk through a quick demo. So what we talked about here is something we call decision intelligence. And that is 4 data streams that are plans, performance, budget, and spend reconciled in one system of record that is decision intelligence, that is interpreted with the analytics no longer in left field, but also running on the backbone of this platform to surface signals that give you the ability to take action.
All right, so what do we need to do to those data streams to get them ready for AI? And that's what we're really talking about here, is not only do you have to have, everybody has those 4 data streams, but the problem is they're not connected, they're not current, they're not governed, and they're not actionable. And what do I mean by that? So connected, we actually have to have correlating IDs between everything that's happening in all of those data streams, so we know when we ask, what are we going to do, we have plans that show us what that was. And when we ask, how are we going to pay for it, we know what that means from the budget perspective. When we say, how did it do, we have the answer to that. And we say, what did it cost? We have the answers to that. And what do we have left? And what was the impact? Once we have these all connected and governed and actionable, we're in a place to do that. The thing that makes them most actionable, and we talked about taxonomy a lot, is to have that taxonomy fluent throughout the data streams so that the cohorts that we're investigating, we have the same information on all of them, and that puts us in a position to be able to hone in and identify what we need to do. And that's what I'm going to show in the demo in a second. When we get these things done and we get them connected, we put ourselves in a position to be able to have an AI detect signals as to what's happening across all 4 data streams in a connected manner. We have the ability to then model scenarios, corrective recommendations that we can then serve up to the user to be able to think about what they want to do to optimize in flight these plans that they're working on. So with that being said, this is what we envision the future to look like for a CMO, a place that they would go every day. Those 4 highlighted metrics across the top, those aren't going to be the same every day. That's going to be based on the interpretation of the signals that are available to us. That's going to be based on a whole list of additional metrics that are going to still be there. You're still going to have insights, but those insights provide the signals that are then aggregated into how we want to go forward and what we might want to do next. Now, this is the dashboard for the organizational leader. We're also going to have them in there for the team department leader and the tactical marketer. And the way that's going to manifest itself is we're going to come down here and we're going to see a list of recommendations. We found a problem. We found a problem in the enterprise segment is underperforming and SMB is exceeding goals. There's an opportunity for budget reallocation here. So what are we going to do about it? I'm going to hit the review button, and that's going to put me in a position now to get first, why is this surfaced? So if I'm the CMO and I'm operating at this really high level and I've now got this recommendation to move money from point A to point B, to have that conversation with the 5, 6, 7 people that I need to understand why it was surfaced. I have to have the rationale that AI found in the data models to get us there. So I see the discrepancy between those areas, and then it's going to surface up the recommendations. Option A is the obvious one. Hey, let's take money from the excess performance of SMB and move it to enterprise. But guess what? It doesn't cover the gap. It gets me to 95%. Instead, take underperforming money from enterprise and move it to the overperforming SMB and accelerate what we get out of that. This is a business level decision, not just a marketing decision. And that's what can be surfaced, and that's what can put you in a position to be successful. Come by the booth. We'd love to show you this in more detail. Love to have these conversations with you about what you're experiencing and where you want to head with this. Thank you so much for today, and I am out of time.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you, and thanks to our panelists.